In the early 2010s, city life was vibrant, but getting around was tough. Taxis were expensive, public transit was unpredictable, and waiting in the rain was routine. Then, a new app arrived. With a tap, a car came to you. Suddenly, the city felt open and free. Ride-sharing was magic, convenient, modern, and everywhere. But behind the sleek interface, something was missing. The promise of freedom hid a secret. The risk was invisible, until tragedy struck. For Maria, the app was a lifeline, until one night changed everything. Becoming a taxi driver once meant passing tough government-run background checks, fingerprints, FBI databases, the works. Cities treated taxis as a public utility, prioritizing safety. These checks caught serious red flags: violent crimes, DUIs, sexual offenses. Ride-sharing companies wanted speed, no fingerprints, just a name and social security number. But these checks were full of holes. Aliases, missing records, and out-of-state offenses often slipped through. Dangerous individuals could, and did, get through. Convenience came at a cost. The cracks were widening, and everyone was starting to notice. The illusion of safety shattered as chilling stories surfaced, each one more harrowing than the last. Passengers, often women, reported assaults, kidnappings, and harassment by rideshare drivers. Experts warned that the rapid growth of these platforms outpaced safety measures. In Michigan, a driver went on a shooting spree between rides. He'd passed the company's background check. The victims' families spoke out, demanding answers. In South Carolina, a convicted felon kidnapped and assaulted a passenger. The survivor's testimony brought the courtroom to tears. In California, dozens of sex offenders and violent criminals were found driving for rideshare apps. Investigators revealed glaring gaps in background checks. These weren't rare flukes, they revealed a pattern. Victims' families and advocacy groups amplified their voices, refusing to be ignored. The public was horrified. Trust in the apps evaporated, and experts warned of a growing crisis of confidence. Advocacy groups and victims' families demanded accountability. Legal experts called for urgent reforms. The narrative shifted. This wasn't just bad luck, it was corporate negligence. Investigative journalists uncovered troubling internal documents. Lawmakers and prosecutors launched investigations. Experts testified about the urgent need for oversight. The question wasn't if there was a problem, but how deep it went. Experts warned the issue was systemic. The industry's regulatory gray area was gone. New laws and regulations began reshaping the landscape. The digital dream had become a public safety nightmare. The reckoning had begun, and the world was finally paying attention. Investigators uncovered a system riddled with loopholes, but the real story emerged through painstaking interviews and data analysis. Private, name-based checks only searched records from the past 7 years. Older felonies went undetected. Investigators interviewed former background check employees, who admitted the process was rushed and incomplete. Many databases were incomplete, missing records from certain counties or states. Data analysts mapped out the holes, revealing entire regions with no reliable information. Identity fraud was easy. No fingerprints meant no way to confirm who was applying. Investigators even tested the system themselves, successfully applying with false identities. Companies touted continuous monitoring, but it only caught new offenses, not old ones. Experts told investigators the system was reactive, not preventative. The Michigan shooter had a history of complaints, but they were ignored. Investigators traced a paper trail of warnings that were never acted on. Audits in cities like San Francisco found drivers with convictions for murder, assault, and sexual offenses. Auditors shared their shock in interviews, calling the findings unprecedented. These were exactly the people background checks were supposed to keep out. Investigators confirmed the system failed at its most basic promise. The evidence was overwhelming. The system was broken. Behind the scenes, investigators described feeling frustrated and alarmed by what they found. It was designed for speed, not safety. Insiders admitted that efficiency was prioritized over thoroughness. The public was at risk. Interviews with families and passengers revealed deep fears and frustration. The company's defenses were crumbling. Internal documents obtained by investigators showed growing panic inside corporate offices. The need for real reform was undeniable. The truth was out, and investigators made sure it couldn't be ignored. As lawsuits mounted, ride-sharing giants insisted, "We're not a transportation company, just a tech platform." Their lawyers argued they were simply intermediaries, not responsible for drivers' actions. Taxi companies countered that ride-sharing apps dodged rules and accountability. Ride-sharing companies pointed to user agreements packed with liability disclaimers. Taxi companies argued these digital contracts let tech firms skirt strict regulations. Tech companies promoted their star rating system as a safety net. Taxi advocates fired back, saying ratings were no substitute for background checks and real oversight. The legal argument was clever, but the public demanded accountability. The pressure on ride-sharing companies was mounting. Tragedies and investigations forced lawmakers to act, but the legal process was anything but simple. In courtrooms nationwide, the tech platform defense was tested. Judges ruled ride-sharing companies couldn't escape liability, setting new legal precedents. Cities and states passed laws targeting ride-sharing, requiring stricter background checks and closing regulatory gaps. The industry changed, because it had to. Legal battles and new laws redefined what it meant to be a ride-sharing service. The ride-sharing story is a lesson in tech, innovation, and regulation, a reminder that progress comes with responsibility. Safety wasn't a priority until tragedy forced change. Real people paid the price for oversight. Growth came first. Protection was an afterthought. The rush to innovate left gaps that only hindsight could fill. Star ratings and basic checks were never enough. We learned that trust must be earned, not assumed. Now companies use accredited firms, search more databases, and monitor drivers for new offenses. It's a step forward, but it came at a cost. The system is better, but it took horrific crimes and public outrage to get here. We can't forget the stories behind these reforms. Safety rules are often written in blood, just like seatbelt laws and fire codes. History repeats itself if we don't pay attention. The convenience of ride-sharing was real, but the early risks were deadly. We must remember the lessons learned the hard way. Today's safety features, trip sharing, emergency buttons, exist because people demanded them. Your voice matters. They're not just code. They're the legacy of hard lessons. Every update is a promise to do better. The safe ride you take now is built on past pain. Let's honor those stories by staying vigilant. When tech impacts our safety, we can't afford to move fast and break things. Accountability matters, and it starts with us. The cost of ignoring it is always too high. So, as you use these services, demand transparency, use the safety tools, and speak up when something isn't right. Together, we can make sure the future of ride-sharing is safer for everyone. The lesson is ours to carry forward.